Welcome, fellow bookworms, to TBR's Den. My name is Whitney, and today we have our December wrap-up. I had an amazing December. I did 24 days of Bookmas, and I actually ended up reading all the books on my list. And I managed to read a little bit of my 2 rollovers, not much, don't get me wrong, but I did read a little bit. Of course, it was right off the bat, and then I didn't touch them for the rest of the month because I was just so busy with all the other books. But it was an amazing month, so I do get a reward for December since I was able to complete everything. So this will be going into my game to use at some point, and basically all the reward is, it means I don't have to do a honey jar prompt if I don't want to, like if there's a prompt that I just really not feeling that month or whatever, I don't have to worry about it. So let's go ahead and start with the stats. So like I said, it was a really good month. I was working on my end of year stats and such. Amazingly, it's the best month as far as the number of books read, but not the highest page count for the year. But I did read 6,486 pages, so it was one of the higher ones, but there was one month that I actually read more than that. Physical books, I read 25, and then I had 2 audiobooks, which equaled 33 hours, 28 minutes, which that's not included in the page count. So I read 24 fiction, 3 nonfiction, and of all my reads, 4 of them were rereads. Genres, again, these kind of overlap, so some fit multiple genres. I had 8 fantasy, 7 romance, 6 young adult, 5 children's, 4 classics, 4 mystery, 3 literary, 2 middle grade, 2 thriller, 2 memoirs, 2 historical, 1 sports, 1 short stories, 1 sci-fi, and 1 biography. Top moods were mysterious, which is a pretty high one for me. Lighthearted, which I don't always read lighthearted books, and then dark, which is another one that's pretty high for me. And yeah, like I said, it was a great month. I originally had, 13, 14 prompts. That includes my genre-a-thon. I added an extra book for genre-a-thon, and then because I was doing 24 days of Bookmas, I didn't have one of my books when I wrapped them all up, so I added on 12 more, and then my 2 genre-a-thon books didn't count for Bookmas, and so that's kind of how you got the 27. And then, yeah, I had my 2 rollovers. So I guess we'll start there. And then, as always, we'll start at the bottom and work our way to the favorite book of the month. So as far as my 2 rollovers go, we had Shogun by James Clavell, which I started back in October. I read, I think, 21 pages of this, like I said, right at the beginning of the month, and I haven't touched it since. But definitely can't wait to get back into this one because I was really enjoying it, and so I definitely will plan on continuing on. I think I have 570 pages left, and it was originally 1,152 pages, so I'm definitely making progress, but I can't wait to get back into it because it's still been on my mind even though I've been reading so many other books. So there is that one. And then we also had one of the ones I started in November, which was The Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, and I read 25 more pages of this one. This one was originally for a prompt in November, and it was page number chosen by Die, and I got 700, and this is just over 700. So again, another one I've been thinking about all month, so I can't wait to jump back into it. But at least I did read a little bit more, so I read something of both my rollovers, and then I just got too busy with all the other books this month. So let's go ahead and start at the bottom. We did not have any DNFs, which DNFs are my 1-star. I don't rate them like on Goodreads and Storygraph or anything like that, just because I don't think that's really fair as far as the average star rating for the book when I didn't actually read it. But for my journal, that is where the 1 stars go, they're DNFs. And then we had 2 2-stars. So the first one was one of my genre-a-thon picks, and this was actually the one I was more excited for, and then I was less excited for the other book I picked, and that's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I listened to this, like I said. The narrator was fine. I liked her a little bit. The pace probably could have been a little bit faster, but I did like listening to her and such, which was the only reason I actually got through this. I hated this book. It was a struggle. I had like 3 hours left and I just sped it up because I'm like, I'm over it. I'm just over it. I hated all the characters. I didn't think there was anything redeeming about any of the characters, which I don't mind not liking a character in a book. Like, if that's kind of their purpose, like, you're not supposed to like them, I don't mind that, but you should have some connection. And I just hated every single one of the characters. I found them all very whiny and entitled and just very wah cruel, and I just didn't enjoy it at all. I didn't think there was really a plot line at all. I mean, it kind of circles back around at the end, but yeah, I did not like this. Basically, you have Heathcliff, and he's kind of done wrong. There's a brother and sister. He's taken in by their father as a ward, and the brother's very cruel to him. He ends up becoming friends with the sister, and then they kind of have a little bit of a falling out too. And there's another brother and sister combo that's in there as well. And it was just horrible. And basically, Heathcliff wants to get revenge for how he was treated and such. But yeah, there was just nothing redeemable about any of the characters. I didn't like any of them. The narrator was okay. Like, I liked her okay. She was like the nanny or governess, or not really governess, I don't think, but kind of she took care of the kids basically. And yeah, I could have done without reading this one. And like I said, I was excited going into this one. I thought I would enjoy this one more than the other one, and I just didn't. So that was the bottom of the barrel for the month. I just did not have a good time with that. And then we had one of my 24 Days of Bookmas books, one of the extra ones I added on. And so this one also got 2 stars, and that's The Candy Cane Caper by Cynthia Blair. And basically in this one you have 2 twins, and their parents are going like on a second honeymoon for Christmas, so they go and stay with their grandparents. And in the meantime, the children's hospital that's in this town is basically running short on money and is going to be shut down. And so they start investigating because they think it's a case of embezzlement. And it was just, I don't like, you don't really get the whole mystery until the very end. Like, that's when it comes to play. And I think it would have been more enjoyable if it had kind of been sprinkled throughout. And it was just kind of weird, like the suspect and such, and like kind of how he acted and whatnot was a little bit weird. It was very, very cheesy, which in and of itself, I don't mind. I like cheesy books, not a problem. But in this case, because it didn't have a whole lot else going for it, it just really didn't work for me. And so it only got 2 stars as well. I do have one other book I found by this author, which is the first in this series. It's, revolving around these twins, which I am going to still read that one and just kind of see what I think of that one. But overall, wasn't a fan of this one. So there is my other 2 star. Then we have our 3 star, which I had quite a bit. And the first one, kind of bottom of the barrel, which probably should have been 2 stars. But I at least, there was that kind of nostalgia aspect, and I did enjoy it a little bit. And that is The Case of the Candy Cane Clue, which is a New Adventures of Mary Kate and Ashley book. And this one was written by Judy Catch. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. And this one was okay. Like, it was fun. It's Mary Kate and Ashley, and you always know, like, the movies and such growing up, like, there's kind of this element where it's not very believable. But in this one, it was really kind of over the top. This girl's having a slumber party at this toy store, and they have on display the last remaining Singing Sammy or something like that. And it gets stolen. And so throughout, the girls are having to figure out who stole the Singing Sammy. And the adults in this case just really didn't act like adults at all, which was just a little bit ridiculous. The whole premise of having this sleepover at this toy store was a little bit over the top and ridiculous. And yeah, it was a bit much. Like, it wasn't very believable. It was cute, but it wasn't very great. So I had a fun time, but that's why it's bottom of the barrel on that. And then the next one, I read 3 of the 4 parts to this one. So this is The Christmas Bells of Georgia, and it has stories by Jeannie Smith Cash, Rose Allen McCullough, Jerry Odell, and Deborah Ulrich. I read the first one in last year for Bookmas, so I'd already read that one, so I read the other 3 this year. I kind of reviewed the first one, like just skimmed through, just kind of refresh myself. And this one's interesting in the fact that they are connected. So it's different authors, but they are connected. So basically you have these 4 identical quadruplets, and their mom died when they were born, and so, or shortly after, and they get adopted to different families. Well, their grandmother is still alive, but she wants to give them this plantation that she owns. Their grandfather has passed on. But she's being very mysterious, so she doesn't want them to know she's still alive until they all come together on their 25th birthday, which happens to be Christmas, and they're required to come together at this plantation, stay the night, and then they'll inherit this plantation. And so you have the 4 different sisters, and each author's writing the story of the different sisters, and basically it's from them getting the letter to up to the point of Christmas, basically. So before they come together, and then at the end, one of the authors does like a little part where they all come together. And the problem with this one was because of the connections, not so much with the girls, but the love interest. In this one, you have 2 of the love interests that are brothers, and the other one lives in that town and is like the manager of the plantation. And so because of that, and the timelines are kind of overlapping, it just was a little bit off, because like at one point you have the 2 sisters who are dating the 2 brothers, like they both go to the house at one point. Like the one gets ill and is staying at the house, and then the other one goes and meets her love interest mom and such is at the house. It's like, wouldn't they run into each other in that case? Like, so that was kind of a problem, because it was a little bit disconnected because of those connections inside the town itself. If it had just been the sisters and the love interest had been, completely separate, it would have been different. Because the 4th sister, her love interest is somebody she kind of grew up. Like, he came to work for her father, and so she grew up. And that's her love interest. So it was completely separate from the town, which worked. But as far as that, it was, and then the epilogue, or the last little part that brings them all together, it was just very rushed, and it wasn't a satisfying conclusion to the story at all. And so yeah, that's why it's kind of bottom of the barrel as well. But not bad, again, if you like Christmas anthologies. It wasn't a horrible one, it just wasn't great. Then we have another Christmas anthology, which I included for 24 Days of Bookmas, and that's Christmas Journeys. And this has stories by Emma Richmond, Catherine George, Lynsey Stevens, and Kay Gregory. Again, I read 2 of these last year, and then I read the other 2 this year. So I read Mistletoe Kisses by Lynsey Stevens and Christmas Charade by Kay Gregory. And again, not horrible. It was actually not... It was pretty well written, better than the Christmas Bells of Georgia, like the stories themselves. But kind of the misunderstanding, especially in Mistletoe Kisses, the misunderstanding and like part of it and everything, it was just a bit much. And I remember the other 2 too. Like, there was kind of this misunderstanding trope, which it wasn't done well, especially in A Man to Live For. That one was pretty rough. And so yeah, it's just kind of the misunderstanding aspect to this. The Christmas Journeys, going on a journey for Christmas, was fine. In Mistletoe Kisses, Jasmine ends up going back. Her grandfather, that whole situation's a mess, but her grandfather is basically very ill and wants her mom and her brother to come. Her brother is kind of a moocher. He's always scheming and then losing money and such, so he's kind of in financial trouble, and he wants to go and ask the grandfather for money. Grandfather is married to somebody who is her mother's age, and then she has a son who Jasmine dated, and they had a falling out. And so that's kind of a whole big situation, and that's why she doesn't want to go back, but then her brother's going back. And so that one, like I said, the whole situation, and then like the misunderstanding component, because there's a reason why her and her love interest had a falling out, and just like the way it kind of resolved and such, it's like you could have said that 5 years ago, like, or and he's like, I've loved you all this time. It's like, so why didn't you ever reach out? Like, it's just a whole situation that was not very enjoyable. And then the other one, Christmas Charade by Kate Gregory, wasn't bad. But again, kind of that misunderstanding aspect. It was just like, really, come on. And so I didn't really enjoy that one as much, because basically it's a fake dating, so her dad always tries to set her up. And so she meets this guy, and she's like, why don't you come home with me? They're on a train. And why don't you come home with me for Christmas? And then she doesn't realize who he is, but her dad does. And he's like always trying to set her up with like up and coming men that are going to be really successful. And so, yeah, just kind of why he didn't explain things, and like that whole misunderstanding was a bit rough. So, not, again, if you like Christmas anthologies and you don't mind the cheesiness, it's not bad, but the misunderstanding aspect of this is what dropped it down for me. So there's that one. Then we had our next one, which was for our game, and it had Pocahontas, which was river or water feature. And so for this one, I was trying to help myself out. So I chose Why Frogs Are Wet by Judy, Hawes, and this is illustrated by Don Madden. And this was cute. It's like a science book. And so it was really cute. And you can see like this one is colored, the illustrations, but not all of them are. And so like I wish it had been one way or the other. Like I don't mind the black and white, but I just wish it had been one or the other. And then just kind of the way the facts were presented wasn't as engaging as it could have been. So why I still really enjoyed it, because I like, biology and like nature and such. It was just a little bit like not as engaging as it could have been. So that's what dropped it down for me. The next one we have here is Battleground by Jim Butcher. So this is the final one to date of the main series of the Dresden Files. I'm not including like the little short stories, novellas, or whatever. And there was an audiobook that came out, I think last year or the end of the year before, that I'm not including. So this is the final one to date. There's supposed to be more. I thought there was just supposed to be like a final trilogy, but I was looking and I think there's supposed to be like 5 more books and then the final trilogy or something like that. And these last 2 books were rough. I think the author's kind of over this. The last book before this, Peace Talks, was pointless. Like, this book could have been set up without that book. It was just like, there was no reason for it. And after reading this book, I thought, well, maybe like some of the conflict, because he kind of has a conflict with his grandfather, and then there's a thing with his brother, and it's like, well, maybe that will come into play in this book. Really didn't. So basically, this is kind of the big apocalyptic event. You have this like Titan, I want to say, and she wants to just destroy the world, but she started with Chicago, and then you find out it turns out she has a beef with the Winter, the Queen of Winter, or whatever. I don't know, but it wasn't enjoyable. It did make me cry, because there's something that happens in here that just destroyed me. And I'm like, really? Because the whole series is kind of leading up to something, and then with him and another person, and then that just like, it's like, really? Like, why would you even do that? So anyway, it did make me cry though. But yeah, it wasn't enjoyable. Like, and overall, like, the books have been pretty enjoyable, but this one, it was just like a lot of repetitiveness, like big sections of the same scene, like building and building and building, but like nothing's happening. Like at first they're kind of at the stronghold, trying to figure out, all the different players and what people are going to be doing and such. And then there's like this battlefield, but it's just like the same field for like ages, pages and pages. And so it was just a whole lot of nothing, and it's a long book, like it's almost 600 pages, and I'm just like, come on. And this one was I got the Mickey Mouse gang here, and so it was for a friend group, and he has, his group of friends that always play a part in the things he's facing. So if you're not familiar with the Dresden Files, you basically have Harry Dresden, who is a wizard PI in Chicago, and at first it starts off he's just doing PI work and helping, the police with different cases and such, and then as it progresses, like there's bigger bad guys, he's more like in the political behind the scenes, like the power struggle between these different factions and such, and it just kind of, builds from there. But yeah, this one, like, the author seems like he's over the series, and so the fact that there's supposed to be more, I'm like, I honestly don't know if I want to continue it. We had all the books minus these last two, Peace Talks and Battleground, which we got because at the time I was like, well, I'll get those too, and I'll just read the whole series. But yeah, these last two were not as horrible as Ghost Story. Like, that one I hated, but they weren't great at all, and the last one was pointless. So, this one, I mean, there was a point, but it was just like, what? Like, it was so long, and it did not need to be. So, there's that one. You can see how I felt about that one. And then, let's see here. Then we have our next one, which was for the prompt. We have The Fox and the Hound, which was an emotional read because The Fox and the Hound always makes me cry. And for this one, I chose Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This was one I meant to read for a different TBR, never got to it. So I was happy to get it on this TBR. And this one, the premise of it's good. So basically, her daughter, the main character's daughter, goes missing. And then, like 10 years later or something, she meets this guy, starts dating him, and meets his daughter, and his daughter looks exactly like her daughter, or very eerily similar to her daughter. And so there's kind of this mystery, like, what happened to my daughter, and why does this girl look like her? And kind of the way it played out and everything was fine. However, the author made the little girl who looks like the main character's daughter and the dad that she's dating, like, very quirky, but in a weird way. And it didn't need to be like that. Didn't add anything to the story, to the plot or the characters or anything. So I'm really not sure why she went that route. And if anything, it kind of made it less enjoyable. So that's kind of why it's only got a 3-star, because the premise and kind of the rest of the way it played out was fine. And it did make me tear up at one point, so it was a little bit emotional. And I figured, she lost her daughter, there's going to be a moment or something in there. And there was, but yeah, the way she did those two characters and then kind of how it played out regarding the dad, the story would have been better, I think, if she hadn't done that. And there's a second daughter too, and the way she made that, like, why are all these 3 people so weird, And I don't mind weird, but it didn't really fit, and it didn't add anything to the story. So that was kind of why it wasn't like a 4-star or anything like that, because of that. So, but overall, not bad. Just, it was some choices the author made that I was just like, Then the next one we have is one that was a book talk pick. So this is a bookworm and book talk pick, which that one will go back in the honey jar. They always do. And this one was from, I'll tell you here in a second. And it'll be linked down below as well. Let's see here. Where is it? Emma Louise is the book talk channel, and I went on there, and basically she was doing hyped books from book talk and whether they were worth buying and reading or not. And one of those was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And so, obviously this is a pretty popular one here on BookTube. And I can see why people enjoy it. Like, I can see it, but I didn't love it, honestly. And yeah, I've actually had this on my shelf, like either my mom or my sister or somebody. It was like secondhand handed down to me. So this is like the original edition from the 90s. And it wasn't bad. So basically, you have this group of people, and they are like studying like classics or Latin or something like that. They're studying like something to do with classics and Latin and different languages and whatnot. But basically, one of their friend group dies. And so it's basically, and you learn that right off the bat, like this guy named Bunny dies. And so it's basically kind of, you have this other guy that's narrating, and he's kind of going through from when he started and kind of became part of this group. And then into, what are you doing, Kat? She's playing with something. And into, like the aftermath and such of the event and kind of what happened. And again, it wasn't bad, but I didn't think it was all that great. Like, a very, very slow pace. Again, just kind of weird, which I like weird. Again, I like weird books, so that in and of itself wasn't really all that much of a problem. But again, kind of the angst between the characters kind of got old. It was a little bit repetitive at times. Like, it could have been shorter. The premise and the plot and everything was great, but it could have been shorter. And so, yeah, that's why it only got 3 stars from me. I think if you're interested in it, it definitely is worth picking up and reading. So if you're interested, I'd say pick it up, but just take your time. Like, don't expect to rush through it because it's very slow paced, very dense. But yeah, it only got 3 stars from me because I didn't think it was as amazing as everybody is always talking about, because it is very slow, very repetitive. I think if it had been condensed a little bit, the premise of it and everything would have worked for me really well. So then the next one was for this is a Heffalump, and so it's not real imaginary animals. For this one, I chose Barbarian's Mate by Ruby Dixon, because they're on this ice planet and there's different types of animals here. And so yeah, this one actually worked really, really well. There was even some new things that she came across in this one. And so basically, the ice planet Barbarians, if you're not familiar, you have these group of women and they are trafficked by aliens, but when they're having problems with their ship, they end up dropping them on this ice planet, and there's these big blue aliens that are already there, and basically to survive on this planet, they have to get a Qui, which is like a symbiote life force, and that allows them to be able to live on the planet, but the Quis resonate to each other when they find somebody who's a compatible mate. So in this one, you have Josie, yes, and Hayden, I believe. But basically, it's kind of an enemies to lover. Like, they're very antagonistic to each other in like the previous book and such. And so she's not happy that he's the one. She's wanted to resonate. Like, she's been really excited about it. And then she resonates to him, and so she's not happy. Her kind of history from Earth, like she was a foster kid. Went from place to place and such. So she just really wants to feel wanted. And because of their history and antagonistic attitudes towards each other, she really struggles because she doesn't feel like he wants her. And it's just because of the queen and whatnot. And I didn't love this one. I've noticed like the resonance aspect of this is starting to like wear on me of this series. My favorite ones have been the ones where they haven't resonated and they've fallen in love before that comes into play. And especially this one, because they're so resistant to it, it was really, really rough. And I just didn't really ship them all that much. And he has his own issues as far as resonance and such, because he has resonated before and things happen. So he has his own issues, she has her own issues, and it's really, really rough. And then there is kind of this new creature that comes into play, which that I wish there had been more of that, because that was really, really interesting. But I am excited based on the end of this book. I am excited for the next one, to see what happens with because there's two new girls now. So I'm like, okay, I'm ready to read the next one. But yeah, I still loved it. Like, it's still just really fun and just a good time, like lighthearted and such. Even though there's darker aspects to it. Like, don't get me wrong, like some of the things that have happened to her, there's darker aspects to it, but it's still a good time and makes you feel good. But I just didn't really love these two, and just kind of the conflict just, and again, it kept repeating. Like, it didn't make really good progress until I guess midway. But yeah, so there's that one. Loved it, but well, not didn't love it. Liked it, but didn't love it. So there's that one. Then we have another extra one. I thought it was for my game. Another extra one that I just added in. I hauled it recently and I want to read it right away. And that's If You Would Have Told Me by John Stamos. This one, I liked, like, a lot of the memoirs you read, they start when they're children. He didn't. He kind of jumped in when he was at rock bottom, is where he jumped in. Like, he was at rock bottom and kind of making that change because he hit rock bottom. So I kind of liked how it started. My struggle with this one, and the reason it only got 3 stars, is it's very rambly and it was kind of hard to follow, like, the timeline. Like, it sort of had a timeline. Like, it started when he was on, was it General Hospital, maybe? I don't remember. And then kind of Full House, and then like ER, but otherwise it jumped around from different time periods, and so it was kind of hard to follow along, and know at what point this event was happening because he was jumping around so much. But I did like it, like, especially the whole, when he was working on Full House and such, which it doesn't go in, like, in depth. But I will say, like, you learn some things that you're like, man, like, you really did that? Like, and so there was things that I learned about him as a person. You know, I'm not like a huge fan, so I didn't know a lot about him. I was a Full House fan. That's the main reason I pulled this up. I loved Uncle Jesse growing up. Like, I grew up with Full House, so that's why I picked this up. And so there's some things you learn about him that you're just like, you're not a great person. Even, you know, though he was at rock bottom and whatnot. That is besides the point. There's also, like, you learn, like, he's so loyal. Like, he really values his friendships and his family. Like, very, very loyal. And you can see that, like, especially when he's talking about his mom and such. That made, there's points I teared up in this one as well. And so, and I didn't realize, like, him and Bob Saget didn't get along when they were on Full House initially. Like, they had their growing pains for sure. And it really wasn't until later they became really, really good, close friends. And I love the Beach Boy aspect, like, because my mom was a big, or is a big Beach Boy fan. And I don't know if she still really listens to them all that much, but I remember growing up and we'd be driving and singing and listening to the Beach Boys and such. So I'm a huge Beach Boy fan too, and so that kind of component of this was really enjoyable. It's just, like I said, the rambly aspect and kind of the jumping around was what dropped it down to a 3-star for me. Otherwise, I think it probably would have been a 4-star. But if you like John Stamos, or you really loved Full House or anything like that, or you're a Beach Boy fan because he talks about them a lot, you might enjoy this one. So there's that one. Then we have another one. So this wasn't for the game. It could have been, though, because I got a prompt which was same as last person. And when I went to Barnes & Noble and I asked, you know, if she remembered what the last person bought, specifically maybe a fantasy, because that was the square I landed on, she couldn't really remember. She mentioned a couple of Twisted Tales, though. And I couldn't find the one she mentioned, but I did find this anthology, and I ended up reading this whole thing. This was actually my last read of the month, and because I started, like, I read, I think, 4 of the anthologies, um, when I pulled it for 24 Days of Bookmas, and then I read the rest of it after I had kind of wrapped up everything else. And this got a 3-star. I'm not a big fan of anthologies. I think, especially when as many as were in here, like, I think there's like 16 different stories, short stories, and I just think it's so hit and miss. The fact that this was Disney and it was kind of a twist on the Disney tales. I've only read one other Twisted Tale, and I really did enjoy that one. And I'm just not a big fan of short stories because it's so hard to really get into them. But I did overall enjoy this. Like, it was a nice kind of like palate cleanser from the month. And there were some that I really enjoyed, some I didn't. Like the Lion King one, especially, the vibes just didn't feel like Simba to me, you know? And kind of the premise of it, like, it was just really, and like how Mufasa acted, like, it just, it did not feel like the Lion King to me. But other ones I really enjoyed, especially the last one is kind of an Aurora retelling, or twist, and so I did enjoy that one. So yeah, just hit and miss. Like, some of them I enjoyed more than others. The fact that it's short stories and anthologies, though, I'm never gonna really, really love something that's in that format. So that's just the way it is. But I ended up going with a different book, which we'll get to for that prompt. But this, could fulfill it as well, because this was actually the one she mentioned initially. So there is that one. Then we have, let's see here, our 4 stars. So that was the last of the 3 stars, and now we have our 4 stars. And so first up, we have another one that was for 24 Days of Bookmas, and it's another Mary-Kate and Ashley, and this one is The Case of the Nutcracker Ballet, and this one was by Megan Stein. This one was much better done. So you still kind of have that, Mary-Kate and Ashley aspect, but it was more believable. Because basically Ashley is going to be in a performance of the Nutcracker, and the lead, somebody steals her lucky slippers, and then she just kind of falls apart, and she's not dancing well, and so they're kind of having to figure out who stole these slippers in time for the show to basically go on. So it's a little bit more believable. You have a couple adults and they're actually acting like adults. And so, yeah, this one, that's why I got 4 stars, because, again, is it the greatest thing ever? No, but star ratings for me are about the enjoyment aspect, and I really did have a good time with this one. So there is that one. And then next up, we have another one for 24 Days of Bookmas, and that is Cutting Edge, by Carolyn Keene, which is the case 70 of the Nancy Drew files. And this was actually my first Nancy Drew book. I've never read any of the Nancy Drew books. And I watch Gab. I'll leave her channel linked down below. And she plays a lot of the Nancy Drew games. So while I was reading this, I kind of had that voice from the game inside my head. And it just really added to this for me. Again, cheesy, but so well done. It's cheesy, but it's well written, and it's really enjoyable, and it is pretty believable. So basically, you have her friend is dating this sports caster, and he invites them to go to the National Figure Skating Championships, but basically somebody's sabotaging some of the girls, and so Nancy is having to figure out who's sabotaging. There's like this new fancy scoreboard, and somebody steals a component from that, and so she's just having to figure out what's going on, basically. So this was a good time. I have several of the Nancy Drew books that I've been collecting as I go to thrift stores and find them, and so I can't wait to read some more, because it was just fun. So there's that one. Then our next 4 star. So this one, in all honesty, I did not read all of these. This one has 9 different stories. This is a Prairie Christmas collection, and it has stories by Tracy Bateman, Pamela Griffin, Joanne A. Grote, Maren Langer, Darlene Mindrup, Tracy Peterson, Deborah Rainey, Janet Spaeth, and Jill Stengel. So I read the first one the first 2 years ago, and then I read the next two this year. And so that was One Wintry Night by Pamela Griffin and Image of Love by J.N. Grote. And these ones, they're actually really, really well written. And I did like that they have, like the one has like a little recipe at the end. And yeah, they're about basically, yeah, it has Boston's Ladyfinger recipe, which is really cool. Um, and it's about basically these people who are like on the frontier, blazing the trail. And so they're not like really well established or anything like that. And it was a good time. Like, I think these were well written. I like that kind of historical, like, prairie aspect, what pioneers. That's what I'm looking for. Like, I like that pioneer aspect of this one. And like I said, the stories were actually well written. So that's why this one got 4 stars when the other ones didn't. So yeah, if you're looking for a Christmas anthology and you kind of like that pioneer prairie aspect, this is definitely one to try to pick up. I really, really enjoyed the 2 stories I read and then the 1 story from last year as well. Then let's see here, the next 4-star we have this was Puss in Boots, and so it was different country. And for this one, I chose City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab, or Victoria Schwab. And yeah, I had a really good time. So basically, you have Cass, and she can separate the veil between the living and the dead and go behind the veil and whatnot. And her parents do like a paranormal writings and such, and they get this offer to do a show. And so the first stop is in Scotland. And so they're over there in Scotland, and she meets somebody else. She has her best friend who is a ghost, and she meets somebody else who can also go behind the veil and such. And there's kind of this ghost that is causing problems, let's just say. And so she's kind of having to address that as well. So this was a fun time. I really, really enjoyed this one. This is my 3rd book by her. I read Gallant, and then I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I Cannot Talk, and then this one. So this one's obviously younger than the other 2. But still, I really, really enjoyed, I really like this author's writing, and I cannot wait to dive into more. So there is that one. And then let's see here, our next 4-star, which honestly, I'm debating whether I should have put this higher or not, but there was things that I didn't love about it. And so this one was a bookworm, and it was favorite or random color. Again, bookworms go back in the honey jar, so that one will go back in. And for this one, I got like a blue-green. I think it was more of a green-blue, but whatever. And so I chose Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo, which is the 2nd one in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And also you have the Grishaverse as well, so there's other books in there as well. This one, I love the first half of it. The reason it kind of got dropped down was more the second half of this book. So basically, you have Alina, and in the first book, there's the Fold, which is like this dark area that kind of separates the kingdom. And there's these people called the Grisha who have like magical powers, and they each have like different magical abilities and such, and so they kind of have different factions as well. And Alina is part of the soldiers, and she doesn't know she has powers until something happens and they're revealed. And so there's kind of the leader of the Grisha, which is the Darkling, and he has like shadow powers, and she kind of has light powers. So things happen, and so this is following the aftermath of the first book. And there's a new player in here, which I really, really liked. I like that. There's kind of a ship aspect to this one in the beginning that I really liked. My problem with this one was her main love. Like, there's kind of a love triangle situation in both books. But her main one, just the way they were in the first book, and the conflict and issue they had in this book, just I didn't really feel it. It got a little too angsty for me, and it just didn't really fit with what you know of them in my mind, because they have such the strong bond and such that you would expect that really, like, I could see part of the conflict and how, that could be an issue, but the rest of it and the way they weren't really there for her, was a bit rough. So that's kind of what dropped it down for me. I still really enjoyed it, and the first half I absolutely loved. But the second half I was just kind of like, I didn't really like how it played out. But I am still really excited to read the third book. So there's that one. That was another 4-star. And then our next 4-star was another one from the game. And this one we had Snow White, and this was Found Family. So there is that. And for this one I chose another children's book, and this was Little Dog Lost by Rene Guillot. And illustrated by Wallace Tripp, and this is actually, I think, translated from French, so that's pretty cool as well. But basically you have this little corgi puppy, and he gets lost in the woods, and you have this fox, and she lost her cubs. I have a cat, sorry. Get Fräulein off. The cat is wild in here. And so anyway, she lost her cubs, and so she finds this corgi pup and starts raising him. Well, then he finds this little girl, or this little girl finds him, I guess. Well, her dad finds him and gives him, this actually had a Christmas element, because gives the pup to his little girl for Christmas after he finds him. And then there's a little boy, and I really like, because most of the dog stories I read from this time period, it's a boy and his dog. And so I liked that there was a little girl. There was still a little boy too, but there was a little girl and the dog. I really, really liked that. I liked the fox aspect. So you have, this mother, and that this little corgi pup, like, he's kind of in two worlds. Like, he has that wild aspect, but then he also has this home with this girl and the boy and such. So this one was just really, really cute and really, really fun, and you kind of get the different viewpoints and such, and it was kind of sad. It made me cry at one point, but also so heartwarming as well. So I had such a great time with this one. I really, really loved it. So there's that. Then next up we had Tigger, which was T-I-double-G-R, which is an ABC author challenge. This one again always goes back in. And for this one, we got Z. So I chose The Prince of Mist by Carlos Ruiz Zafon. And I was so pleasantly surprised by this one. Absolutely loved it. So basically, you have, it's during the war, or right before, and so you have this brother and sister, and their dad decides he wants to move to, the seaside and just try to get out of the city before the war comes and whatnot. And they meet this boy, and there's kind of this mystery. He has this grandfather who's kind of mysterious, and then there's this ship that's fallen, and they kind of see things. And I really enjoyed the writing. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters. What dropped this down, this probably would have been a 5-star read, but you really don't get a full explanation for things. And so that's kind of what dropped it down for me. I wanted more of an explanation for this Prince of Mist guy. And so you don't get that. I didn't realize this is part of the series. So this is the first one in the series, but I was kind of looking at the synopsis of the next one, and it doesn't seem it seems like it's more of a companion. And so I don't think you're really going to get any more explanation than what you got in this one. So I'm kind of disappointed about that. I might try to pick it up anyway, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one so much, and I needed more of why was that happening? And you didn't really get that explanation. So that's what dropped that one down for me. And the last one I gave technically a 4.5 star, but I always round down for my journal and for Goodreads and such. So it's a 4 star, and this is the one that I ended up going with for same book as Last Person. So again, this will go back in the honey jar. And this is the last book the cashier actually bought. Since she was having trouble really remembering, I just asked her, what's the last book you bought? And it was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. As far as like the premise and the vibes of this book, definitely 5-star there. There's just moments that was just like, and that's what kind of dropped it down for me. But as far as like the premise and the vibes, you have, I'm so bad with names, Effie, and she's so it's a patriarchal society, and so she really wants to get into literature college, but only men are allowed to. So she takes the next rung down, which is architectural college. And so basically there's this contest, and she gets chosen, and her favorite author, she gets chosen to go kind of redesign his house, which is falling apart. And so it's his son, and the mom is there, but you don't really meet her. Like, there's a mystery regarding her. And then there is another scholar from the literature college who's basically there to try to prove that this author is a fraud, and he wasn't the one that wrote his works, basically. This book that's very popular and very big. He's there to prove that it wasn't him. But yeah, just kind of the way, and it does kind of, it makes sense in a little bit, but there was like moments where it's like things that the antagonist didn't really seem to fit. And so, and like the whole, like basically the only man in the world she can trust is this other scholar. And so that kind of got a little bit repetitive. It's like not every man she's gonna meet is gonna be this horrible guy, you know? And I get why, like, I understand why authors do that and such, but I think it would have been more impactful if it wasn't like every guy. And then, like I said, they kind of antagonists in this, like some points where he said or did something, it was like it didn't really fit in that section. And so that's kind of what dropped it down. But as far as like the vibes, you have this crumbling house by the sea. You have the Fairy King, and you never really know whether you can trust Effie or not. Like, she doesn't know if she could trust her own mind. So the whole time you're like, is this Fairy King real, or is it all in her mind? Like, that whole aspect, like not really knowing if she could trust her mind. I absolutely love that in books. And so, yeah, it was really, really enjoyable. It's just, like I said, there were moments where it's like, it's not quite a 5-star for me because of that. But I still really loved that book. I can see myself rereading it. It's definitely a great one. And then for our next 5 stars, I know they're Clifford books, but we have Clifford's Christmas and Clifford's First Snow Day by Norman Bridwell. And these were 2 I added on for 24 Days of Bookmas. Like I said, I was trying to help myself out a little bit. And these are just, I mean, again, they're just so nostalgic. They kind of have funny moments. Like if Clifford's First Snow Day, he gets stuck in a snowman. And it actually made me laugh out loud. So they're just cute. They're good times. I think they're really well done. Like this one has like different activity, both of them, different like winter activities they're doing. And yeah, they're just great little picture books that I absolutely love. So there's that. Then our next 5-star was the other one for my genre-a-thon, and I read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I listened to it, rather. I really actually enjoyed this one. I was not expecting to. I did not like Rochester at all. So again, I don't mind a character that's not likable. It's just the way it's done. Like, you gotta have something. And there was moments where I was like, well, maybe he's not so bad. And that's like, both of the books, though, like the way, which is probably just a mindset at that time, like the way they treat children. Like, in this one, Mr. Rochester keeps calling Adele it. And I'm like, she is a child, not an it. But this one, because I didn't like him and the way it plays out, I wasn't sure if I would enjoy the ending or not. And I didn't love it, but the way it kind of came about, I was like, okay, like I can see it. Like just because I don't like him, like I can maybe see why Jane does and whatever. So, but like listening to it, I was like, come on, Jane. Like, I just had a really good time. So basically, you have Jane Eyre, and she gets hired as a governess for Adele, who is like the ward of Mr. Rochester. And then they end up falling in love, but something happens on the eve when they're supposed to be married, and like throughout there's like these strange noises in the house and such. So there's kind of a mystery of what these noises are. And I didn't realize it started when she was a girl. And again, she was a ward of like her uncle, and then he dies, and like her aunt and the older brother are just horrible to her. And then the two sisters aren't very nice either. And so that's kind of another theme that's similar to Wuthering Heights as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I wasn't expecting to enjoy this one as much as I did Wuthering Heights, and it swapped on me. So, Wuthering Heights 2 stars, and this got a 5 star. So, and this, I'm telling you, I listened to the audio with Juliet Stevenson as a narrator. I actually got it for free. I don't know if it still is or not, but I got it for free. I know Audible does some classics where you can get them at no cost. And she was such a great narrator. The different voices for the different characters, good pacing, like a fantastic narrator. And so that really added to the experience for me as well. So if you tried to read this and you're kind of struggling, I say try to get an audio version. And like I said, Juliet Stevenson was a really, really good narrator. So there is that one. Then we have another one, which was for 24 Days of Bookmas, and that's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. So I listened to this last year, and I wanted to read it physically this year because I prefer reading things physically. And yeah, I mean, it's A Christmas Carol. What amazed me is such a short book. It's really not that long, but there's a lot of like nuance and depth to it. Like there's a lot you can get out of this little tiny book. And so yeah, I put this as the last day so I could read it on Christmas Eve. We were at my mother-in-law's for Christmas Eve, so I like read 70 pages, and then I was really tired. The next day I only read a few pages, and then I was able to sit and read it. But yeah, I mean, it's a Christmas Carol, so if you live under a rock and don't know what A Christmas Carol is about, you have Scrooge, and he's a bah humbug and very like penny pinching, cheap, going so far as kind of to be cruel though, like his workers freezing and such. And he gets visited by 3 different ghosts, past, present, and future of Christmas, and trying kind of encouraged to change his ways. So a really great story. If you've never read A Christmas Carol and you're not familiar, I strongly recommend picking it up. So then our next 5 star was for, I think it was Mowgli, and it's Wolf Rep. So for this one, I had the perfect book, and I went for The Wolf by Hannah Whitten. This one I've been eyeballing for so long. I found it, or the second one, I can't remember which one. I found one at a thrift store, got the other off Pingo, and I've been wanting to read it ever since. I loved this so much, like so much. And so basically you have 2 sisters, and the second daughter is born is for the wolf. The first one is for the throne, the second one's for the wolf, and basically they believe that they send this daughter and they appease the wolf, and they're hoping that if he finds their sacrifice acceptable, he'll release these 5 kings, I think it is. 5, maybe? Yeah, I think it's 5. Anyway, they're hoping he'll release these kings. This is not for everybody, and I can completely understand why, because there is kind of a religious, like, component to this. And there's also a self-harm blood component to this. So I can completely understand how this book is not for everyone, but I loved it. And it takes different aspects from different, so it's not just Little Red Riding Hood. You also have like Beauty and the Beast aspect. You have a Snow White component there. And there's also like this nature, like the connection to the woods, and these woods are sentient, and I loved it so much. Really, really enjoyed this. I cannot wait to read the second one and see how it plays out. And so, yeah, I loved it, but keep in mind it's not for everyone. So if you have problems with like religious fanaticism or anything like that, and then the blood and self-harm component, it's heavy in this book, so keep that in mind if that's going to be a problem for you. But otherwise, I completely love this, and it was really hard. These three books, this one and then the other two, it was hard to decide which was my top book for the month because I just loved all of them. The next one that I pulled, which was another one I've been wanting to read, and we got Lady and the Tramp, and this was Unlikely Love Story. And for this one, I chose The Thorn Birds by Colleen McCullough. And this was actually one my mom recommended to me. And so I've been wanting to read it. And December is her birthday month. So I was really excited to get it onto this TBR. And so basically, in this one, it's a family saga. So you have this family, they're originally in New Zealand and then go to Australia. And then you also have this priest. And the Maggie, the daughter of the family, and then him, there's kind of age gap, and then because he's a priest, he has vows and such, and so it's an unlikely love story in that aspect. But it basically goes through from the time, I think it's her like 4th birthday or something, Maggie, and so her 4th birthday, and then each section sort of focuses on a different family member. Like it's broken up in different parts. And so like you have that, but really it's more about Maggie. So the first one's Maggie, then you have Ralph, Patty, Luke, Fee, Dane, and Justine. And it does kind of come full circle around to Justine, which is Maggie's daughter. And yeah, very immersive from the start. It is slow paced, it is dense. Like I read just a little bit at a time. I did not rush this at all. And that's the way to read this, but it's just so immersive and you really feel like you're there with these characters. And you really become invested in them. And it was really, really good. Very emotionally heavy at points. And I kind of like the aspect because it's like you have this priest and it's like Maggie's hurt because he's taken these vows and such, and she's like, just give him up. And it's like, but this is who he is. Like, could he ever really be happy if he gave that up? Would he ever really be happy with you as much as he loves you and such? So you kind of have that like moral dilemma and such. And I really, really loved it. So if you haven't read this one, I recommend picking it up. Really good. And then the last book, this one I chose for my character, which was Christopher Robin. We finally got him the last month of the year. And for this one, I chose my reread of my Sergei, A Love Story by Ekaterina Gordeeva with E.M. Swift. I reread this. I've done it every year for the past 3 years. I originally read it as a teenager. This was my mom's favorite pair figure skaters in the 90s. And so I remember watching that with her. She had me read this as a teenager, absolutely bawled my eyes out. And it was fun reading it for the first time because as an adult, married, I got something completely different out of it than I did as a teenager. But it really talks about her starting, skating and such. And it really is a coming of age story. And then the love story aspect is more the second half. But even after that, like she's still having to learn, what it means to be in love and then be a mother and a wife and such. So it's such a beautiful story, and there's so many different components. One thing I got out of this one, sorry, the cat is like trying to knock over more books. One thing I got out of this one that I hadn't in the past is kind of her sense of humor. Like there's one part where she's going down and Sergei's like, I'll stand on the balcony and watch you. And she's like, what's that gonna do? Like if something happens, How is you being on the balcony gonna help me at all? So just like little bits of that I hadn't picked up before, and then also some of like the injustice and the way like she kind of brushes it off, and she's kind of positive. Like there's a point where these men like assault her in her hotel room, and she kind of brushes it off, and like just some of the other things that people have done, and like Sergei's mother after he died, um how she treated her, and she's like, I don't blame her, she was upset, and just like she's very like positive, like she doesn't let that get her down. um and yeah, it's just a beautiful story, coming of age, love story. Like, you get that sports aspect, and you kind of get a look into how Russia was at the time and everything like that. So it's an absolute beautiful story, and I love rereading it each and every year. So that was the final book of the stack. So yeah, I had, like I said, an amazing month. Let me know if you've read any of these, if there are any of these that you are now interested in reading, what your favorite book of December was, and if you have one in mind that was your favorite book of 2023, I would love to know that as well. I know this video was a long one, so if you're still here, thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.